and we'll call this Lux and OK. And we'll choose Effect, Trap Code, Lux. And we can turn up the intensity here and maybe turn up the saturation. And the cool thing about this is that it behaves very realistically, and we can change the mode to add as well. And this basically creates volumetric light. And what's cool about this is I can duplicate the light here and say move it over, and it automatically, renders out the light. And then I can even change the color of the light, say maybe to like orange or something. And everything updates in my scene. And even the ground has the, correct lighting on it. Although it does look a little bit too bright. So what we can do is lower the opacity of some of these planes so that it doesn't create as bright of a specularity. So for now, I'm going to shut that second light off. And then we're going to take our orange energy ball and bring it out. And then we're going to change the mode to screen. Now we want to change the orange to a bluish color. So we'll add a hue and saturation effect, turn on the colorize, turn up the saturation, and adjust this until it's bluish. Now we want to make it a 3D layer, so we'll turn on the switch, then we'll right click and we'll choose Transform Auto Orient, and then we're going to change Orient towards Cam, hit OK, and then we're going to hit P and bring up the position for the light. And we're going to alt-click on the position, and we're going to link it to the light position. And then we also need to bring up the material options and turn off Accept Lights. So now we can see our effect. It looks pretty good. Maybe scale it down just a little bit. And then let's animate our light. So we'll turn on the keyframe for the position, and let's move our light off into the distance. Then we'll move forward a few seconds and we'll push it down here, have it kind of fly past the camera almost. And that looks good. Okay, now we're going to add some particles, and I'm going to be using Trap Code Particular. However, if you want to create this with CC Particle World, check out tutorial number 30, and you'll be able to create a perfect 3D stroke using that built-in plugin, so you don't need any third-party tools. So we're going to be creating this streak of light that follows our energy. And we're going to do that by creating a new solid. It's going to be Particular. We'll choose Effect, Trap Code Particular. Now, I am using Trap Code Particular version 2, which just came out. Now, I'm not going to be using any of the new features, so everything should work in the older version. However, some of the names of settings may have changed. So, first thing, we're going to change the emitter to a light emitter. And then it says, hey, you need to make sure you name your light emitter. So, okay, we'll hit OK, and we'll go to our light, hit Return, and we're going to call it emitter. And then, if we go to Particular, we could just, refresh this by going to lights. And now you can see we have a bunch of particles following our light. And that's exactly what we want. We're going to turn the emitter size down to 0 by 0 by 0. And also, we want to change the particles per second to none. We want to just control it here at the top and just give it enough particles so that it's an even stream. Now, for the particle size, we want to turn that down maybe just a little bit to 4. And then also we'll change the size over life to a curve that kind of scales it down. And then we'll change the life of the particle to maybe 0.75 seconds, so it's very short. And then we'll change the transfer mode of the layer to screen. Looks like the particles are spreading out a bit, so we'll increase them. And maybe turn the opacity down. That looks pretty good. Now the other thing we want to do is go into the physics. We're going to go into the air down to the turbulent field. And then we're going to turn up the effect position. And what that does just kind of gives it a little bit of randomness on the tail end. So that looks good. The other thing we want to create is the particles that are sort of falling off the energy bouncing on the floor. So we can start with the particles that we already set up and duplicate it. And we're going to make some adjustments to this. So we do want it to come from a light, but we're going to turn up the velocity so the particles are flying around everywhere. And we also want to turn up the velocity from motion. And that way the particles sort of are being flung forward as the animation gets pushed forward. And that's going to be important as they bounce on the surface. Let's also turn up the opacity so we can see them. Maybe turn the size to 2 and maybe turn up the randomness a bit. Now we also want them to bounce and have motion blur. So if we scroll down, there's a lot of settings, but it really does make sense when you start thinking about what you want to be achieving. So let's just close some of these so that we can look at it as a whole. So we want to bounce. So if we go into the physics, turn the air down, we want to change it from air to bounce. And so now we have a bounce option rollout, and we can select the floor layer that we actually want them to bounce off of. And what layer that is our ground plane. So go change it to the ground plane, and hopefully these will start bouncing. We also want to turn the gravity up. So now they're going to come down, they're going to hit that floor surface as they're beginning to do there. And you can see that they sort of are bouncing as they hit it. And we maybe want to turn up the velocity a little bit so that they kind of go off in a little bit more random kind of direction. And for these particles, let's make the life a little bit longer. So if we go into the particle settings, we'll set this to maybe 2 seconds. And we'll go down here. And the slide amount is pretty cool. You see how the particles sort of hit the surface and slide forward? That's what that's going to allow us to do. So very cool. Now we also want to turn on the motion blur. So if we turn on the switch for the motion blur, and then turn on the motion blur for the comp, those particles will immediately start reacting properly. Now it looks like they're getting a little faded out. So if we go into the rendering options, motion blur, we can turn up the opacity boost. And maybe even turn the size of the particles down to 1.5 so they're not too large. And also we probably don't need as many particles for this particular simulation, so we'll turn this down to just a couple hundred. Maybe turn the velocity from motion down. Alright, it's looking pretty good, but we still have this problem of the black edge that kind of pops up because of our stabilization. So what we're going to do is reverse track everything we've done. So we're going to go into the comp settings, and what we need to do is turn them up so that they're higher than the size of the comp. So maybe 1600 by 900. And that way none of our shot goes out of the frame. Although we do need to make a few adjustments to some of the layers. For example, the Lux layer needs to be the same size as the comp. So we go into the solid settings, click on make comp size. Same with these particle settings. We'll just go make comp size, make comp size. So that's all you need to do to make sure that that works. And then we take our street footage comp, drop it into a new comp, and then go into the settings and switch it back to the original size, which is 1280 by 720. Now we're going to add a quick expression. So we're going to take the street footage and drag that comp until we can see both comps. And then in the street footage 2 comp, create a null object. And then we're going to go ahead, make some room here. We're going to go to the bottom here, and we're going to bring up the transform settings, which are right here, and mainly the anchor point and the rotation. And what we're going to do is take the null object from this second comp, make some space, and bring down the transform settings here. And then we're going to alt-click on the position, which brings up the expression control, and we're going to pick whip the anchor point of the original layer. And then we're going to alt-click on the rotation, and we're going to pick whip the rotation of the original layer. And the only difference here is we're going to add a quick expression to the end of the rotation. We're going to do star or times -1. And that's going to reverse the rotation. And by using the anchor point as the position, that's also going to reverse the motion. So it's a little bit tricky, maybe hard to understand, but the good news is it's going to work. So here we have street footage number 2. We're at the very first frame of the animation, and we're going to take our street footage and bring up our parent column, and we're going to parent it to the null. So all that, and look at this. All of our motion has been reversed. Our shot is nice and shaky again, except the only difference is all of the animation is fitting perfectly inside of it. So let's do a quick RAM preview and check it out. Okay, looks pretty good. Maybe some final color correction. Take the curves adjustment. Maybe just brighten it up just a bit. Add a little green to give it a nice tone. And I think this looks pretty nice. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. We took a lot of different techniques like the particles and the light streaks and the ground reflection or specularity, and we combined it into something that can actually be used for a shot. So hopefully you guys see, how these different components can be used together to create some interesting effects. And of course, the idea is to encourage you guys to, take some of the various techniques that you will be learning throughout the tutorials and combine them and create things that you want to create, and that's what it's all about. So, and also check out the forum. I've seen some really cool stuff happening in the work in progress forum. That's a great place where people can post, examples of things that they're working on and get some good feedback. So that's a great thing. We also have the blog, which has tons of great tips and information. And of course, we have some great products, which we recommend. And we have the new Action Essentials 2, which is great for blowing stuff up, creating titles and motion graphics. And, just check that out. It's pretty self-explanatory. Anyway, my name is Andrew Kramer, and we'll see you next time.